Good afternoon. I'm Dave Briggs, and I'm a volunteer in support of Candidates Night here in Hartford. And I'm going to try to present to you the candidates for Selectboard. So we'll go through each candidate. They've chosen their own questions, and therefore you'll be hearing what their real thoughts are. Leading off today for a 2-year term is Matt Busey. And I'm going to ask Matt those questions that he's brought to me earlier. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And so let's start right off. In the last year, as you report, you've been active with the Municipal Building Committee. And would you tell me, first of all, why you chose to get involved and what you think the benefit of that committee's been to Hartford?
The municipal building project is a renovation project of the town. Municipal facility. The building hadn't been renovated in 60 years, and the idea of renovating it has been floating around for quite a while. But when the process started to develop, it became clear to me that there was talent in the town that could help take a load off the select board and also bring expert opinion and decision making into the process. So we assembled a group of 3 people with architectural experience, a couple of people with engineering experience, other people with planning experience, to bring this committee together and choose from a field of, I think originally 15 different architectural firms that were interested in working on the project. I think it's been a great process, and even the skeptics, I think, on the committee originally have agreed that it's been a good process because the decisions that have been made have been thoughtful and not always easily arrived at. And the budget setting process was also thorough, and we're now relatively close to the actual projected budget on the project, and we're using an architectural firm that's able to estimate accurately the final cost of the project very accurately.
So as a technique going forward, would you foresee more citizen committees like this that bring their time and talents to the benefit of the town of Hartford?
Yeah, I think so. And as a select board member, I would encourage citizen committees because it involves more people in the process. You get wider buy-in from the public and better dissemination of the information being discussed. It seems like an open process and not a closed process. That's really important to me in terms of getting people to buy in and support the projects, not just prior to a bond vote or prior to the presentations of them, but ongoing through the life of the project.
Great. My second question I have here is that we're sitting today in a building that you own and you brought value to. You've owned several buildings now in Hartford. Can you talk about what that investment experience has been, not only for you, but how that's now impacting the town of Hartford in terms of tax base?
Well, I can tell you the tax base from my projects has brought the town tax base up. I got into this completely accidentally and did not intend to be a developer. It's not what I was trained to be, and I had no expertise when I started. But I've lived here most of my life now, I can say that. And when I made the decision to stay here, I also made a decision to do as much as I could to bring in my interests and things that I saw as valuable to the town. So this project was a great opportunity. I walked in here, it was largely empty, and the people that owned it at the time wanted to sell it. So I thought it was a great opportunity to try, as an experiment really, to see what, Hartford would do with a project like this. And, the town has been very supportive. The Planning Commission, the Zoning Board, people in town largely have been extremely supportive of this kind of project, and as a result, it's inspired a lot of other projects, I think, and that has had a positive impact on the tax base. Every once in a while, I run into somebody in Hartford, downtown, in White River Junction, who hasn't been here in 15 years, and I see them just looking around going like, wow, this is so different. This has changed a lot. And, people often give me credit for a lot of that, but it really is more that I think I tuned into the possibilities of the downtown here, and it allowed other people to see the possibilities, and they've come along and done similar things. And I've been thrilled like that the cartoon school located here in White River Junction, that some new buildings have been built and brought in interesting companies. It really helps the economy of the downtown. And I think that if you looked at, if you compared downtown, say 15, 20 years ago to now, you'd see it, well, like when I first moved here, there was actually a lot of activity downtown, and it sort of declined and probably bottomed out around 2000. And now that level is coming back up with stores moving in and interesting shops and stuff showing up and funding that can work in the downtown here. That's not to say that the downtown doesn't need a lot more work. And I'm encouraged by some of the projects that are on the drawing boards, like the downtown park, in your dad's name. And, I'm working on the Legion building on South Main Street, and I'm hoping that that project will help develop that end of town and continue the revitalization of the downtown.
Well, moving along from that perspective of having made an investment in the town and bringing the tax base up, we now are considering this concept called tax increment financing. Why do you think tax increment financing so definitely benefits Hartford taxpayers?
I think for Hartford specifically, it's a no-brainer that it makes sense, because there's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to be done in the town, especially the downtown, which has, I think anyone will tell you, very old infrastructure in places. That work is going to have to be done sooner or later, no matter what, in order to maintain the downtown and keep people interested in investing in Hartford and keeping the tax base up. If that's left to go, people are going to leave and not invest anymore. So the tax increment helps us to do that work with money that would otherwise be sent off elsewhere. So it's returning the money that we're paying to the state back to the town in order to produce those improvements to the infrastructure. So it reduces our costs fundamentally. The only risk is that the investment doesn't come, but if you look at the trends in White River Junction specifically, clearly people are investing, and that's going to continue with some large projects that are coming up in the next 5 years.
Well, to clarify then, the taxes paid from this district under this program will be yielded back from the state to help finance our own public utilities. Do I have that correct?
Yeah. The state tax, there's a municipal tax and a state tax. The state tax goes towards funding the state and education. Normally some of that comes back to the town. It depends on whether you're what do they call it, a giver or a taker town, depending on your education program. You get a portion of that back directly from the state for the purposes of doing infrastructure work. So if there's enough development in town, that money is essentially free money that the town gets to use to build its infrastructure and improve investment potential in the tax base.
Well, thanks for that update, and thanks for being with us today, and all the best in your campaign.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Our next candidate is Susan Foster. She is running for a 2-year term. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
Good to have you here today. I'm going to lead off with your first question, which is, you say you want to improve communication. What do you mean by that?
I've been to only a few select board meetings, but I have the impression that the members don't always communicate as well as they might. Sometimes there's a little, shall we say, grumpiness. Also, 5 distinct and unique villages make up the town of Hartford, but they're all part of the town. I've heard some people say, we're the village that's always left out. I've heard others say, they think they're the only village that's important. I would like to encourage more cooperation and communication among the towns. Working together, they make Hartford better among the villages.
You mentioned children in your flyer. What are your concerns about them?
For 20 years, I was a guardian ad litem or advocate for children in the court system. Every child in the court in the state of Vermont has a guardian ad litem and a lawyer. The guardian ad litem, also known as a GAL, tells the court what she or he thinks is in the best interest of the child. Also, for 12 years, I, along with my late husband, Chas Baker, who was a teacher at Hartford High School, were licensed foster parents for the state of Vermont. I learned during that time that there are many needed services for children that are not available, or if available, aren't available to everyone. Now we are faced with needing services for children addicted to opiates. I know that these services take a lot of money, which is in short supply, but instead of bemoaning the lack of finances, I think we should be creative and try to find a way to help these children.
Now, in the Valley News, it said you want accessibility for everyone, including those in wheelchairs. Why do you care about that?
I think that anyone who's asked would say, yes, I think people should have accessibility. But I think until you need the accessibility, you don't realize how often it's missing. I had double knee surgery a year and a half ago. And what I found over the time I was recovering is that sometimes meetings are held upstairs in buildings which have no elevator. And then there are some places that have chairs that go up the stairs. However, that's fine for someone in a cast or with crutches or canes, but not very good for somebody in a wheelchair. To carry a wheelchair up a flight of stairs is a large task. Also, there are parking places which are not as well placed as they might be in town, and I'd like to work on this.
So you've been there and done that.
I've been there and done that.
Right. I see one of your posters, and I have it here, emphasizes your love of the arts. Why do you care about the arts in Hartford?
Hartford has a vibrant art community, including the culinary arts. We have excellent restaurants, a wonderful funky museum, a theater, and a cartoon school. We have music at Tupelo and at several venues during First Fridays when area artists open their studios in the Tip Top building, a building which was restored by the visionary Matt Busey. Investing in the arts, along with the development of our town sports facilities, encourages individuals and families to want to live here, thus increasing our tax base. And by the way, I'm not an artist. This poster was made last night when a group of us got together here at the Coolidge, where David very kindly gave us a room, and we painted and made many posters. So come and vote on March 4th, and you'll see an array of homemade artwork.
Susan, thank you for your thoughtful questions and your enthusiasm for serving Hartford. Thanks for coming today.
Well, just let me say, Dave, if I might, I love this town. There's a vibrancy and a dynamic for change, and I want to be part of that. Although I do have ideas and opinions, I'm not coming with an agenda. In the beginning, I want to listen and learn. I hope you'll consider me when you go to vote on March 4th.
Our next candidate is FX Flynn, and I understand FX stands for Francis Xavier, and FX is an incumbent candidate who has served the town of Hartford for the last 2 years on the Select Board, and I understand you're now running for the 3-year term.
That's right, Dave. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Well, welcome. Let's move on with the questions you've asked me to pose. What can we do as a town to lower taxes?
Well, the main thing is spreading the tax burden among more properties, more taxpayers. I think the simple explanation of that is if we have to levy $1 million in taxes and divide it among 1,000 properties, it would be $1,000 each. If we had 2,000 properties that we could divide that among, it would be $500 each. So whatever we can do to increase the number of properties that are being taxed, the number of homes that are in town, the number of businesses that are in town, that's really the way to go about reducing the tax burden.
Well, town taxes are increasing 6.8 cents. That is an 8% increase. How can that possibly be justified?
Well, that's a very important question. The big factor in the taxes going up this year is that our grand list value is declining. Instead of holding steady with the number of properties or slightly increasing them, we've actually seen a decline in the number and value of the properties in town. That adds 1.3 cents to this year's tax bill, the fact that we are literally not being able to spread the taxes around as much. Also, over the last 2 years, we have added bonds to the town to repair the Queechee Bridge, to build a community center and library out in West Hartford, to do the work on the Maxfield sports complex, to rehabilitate the ice rink, the Wendell A. Barwood Arena, and that adds another 5.4 cents. So right there is your 6.7 cents. In fact, we had to struggle with the real changes in the budget, which were that our health insurance premium was up over $300,000, which would have been an additional 2.2 cents if we hadn't been able to figure out where to make some cuts. We also had to deal with the fact that after a 2-year period where there was no contract with our police department and our fire department and our DPW union, we finally reached agreement on a contract that is favorable to the town over the long haul in terms of pension participation and in terms of contributions to healthcare costs. But that also, those contracts included raises, and that amounted to about $150,000 or another 1.1 cent. So what did we do? Well, we eliminated 5 positions that were not filled. We added, we cut our contributions to the capital funds, where we put some money aside every year in anticipation that we're going to do work or that we're going to buy equipment such as a fire truck. And we cut the surplus that we returned to the taxpayer by $75,000. We did, though, identify a new source of revenue to the town, which is last year we passed an ordinance which means that the town collects whatever traffic fines are imposed if a Hartford police officer tickets someone on the state highways. For years and years, that wasn't happening. We were not patrolling the state highways because we got no revenue out of it. And the Vermont State Police, of course, are not in the habit of providing that sort of coverage. So it was becoming kind of a free-for-all on the state highways. And the select board this year passed an ordinance that allowed us to recover that. Now that money lets us put a traffic officer on every single shift. So we're actually increasing the amount of boots on the ground on every shift going forward next year.
Well, just to elaborate on that a bit, you didn't add police in the budget, and what is more, the animal control officer was cut to part-time. The other task now will have to be taken care of by other officers. How is that not cutting patrol coverage?
Well, again, the fact of the matter is that because we did add that traffic officer, we think that the actual visible coverage in town is going to be increasing next year.
But some would say what we really need is more drug enforcement, not more speeding tickets. What do you say to that?
Well, yeah, that's a very important question. And the reason it's so important is because the choice that is in front of us is, are we going to buy into more drug war, or are we going to try and tackle some of the root causes? We've already bought into the drug war paradigm. 2 years ago, when we were working on the budget that's in place now, we added a detective specifically to work on drug cases. And that's borne real fruit. There was an arrest just last week here in town where we confiscated about $60,000 worth of heroin. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but that was the result of the work of that detective. And so we have already anteed up in terms of the drug war here in town. But I'll say this, I don't think that we're going to succeed in fighting drugs as a war. We have to work on helping to build a community where people have a belief in the future and have hope for the future, because I feel that people who have confidence that the future is positive and that it will work for them, they tend not to use drugs. They don't get involved with it. And so whatever we can do in our town to build a community where the young folks coming up and everyone else feels like, hey, there's a real future here, that will work to help with the drug issue.
A little more general perspective here with this one. When you say Hartford does more with less, why then are our taxes still higher than surrounding towns?
Well, the fact is that we run a very tight ship here, and we actually have to run an even tighter ship for the next few months, because there's a chance that state law will change and will allow companies over 50 employees but 100 or less to get into the Vermont Healthcare Exchange immediately. If that happens, we think that we'll save that $300,000 in healthcare premium increase, and that would free up money to do and add, some more staff back. Perhaps even an additional police officer, for example. But in terms of whether or not we are higher than surrounding towns, I actually would suggest that if you look at the two towns in Vermont that are most comparable to us, which are Brattleboro and Springfield, our tax rate is actually less, distinctly less than both those towns. We were at $2.11 for fiscal year 13, and Brattleboro was over 2.6, $2.60, and Springfield was nearly $3. So we actually demonstrably do more with less. If we compare ourselves to other towns that are the same size or have roughly the same grand list, what we see is that Milton, which is a suburb of Burlington, has a lower tax rate, but they don't have all the businesses and industry that we do, and they don't have as large a fire department or police department. And similarly, if you look at Williston, which is another town with 10,000 people and a town that has a business mix, well, they have significant amounts of business. They have the malls outside of Burlington, and their tax rate is lower. But how about close to home, Norwich? Norwich is actually slightly higher than Hartford, and one of the reasons is that their grand list is smaller. So they have to each ante up more. It's the same thing about the tax burden.
Well, FX, I want to thank you for your enthusiasm and your willingness to participate today, and all the best in your election campaign.
Well, thank you very much. And I would just like to say that it's been an honor to serve on the Select Board, and I think that you know that I'm in there doing the homework and trying to ask the questions on your behalf. I do enjoy having dialogue with you, and I hope that you'll feel that you can pick up the phone or send me an email if you would like to discuss any of these things directly.
Good afternoon, this is Dave Briggs, and I'm here today to interview Sandy Mariotti, who's running for Select Board for a 2-year term. So, welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I have some questions for you.
Okay.
And the first question is, what inspired you to run for the Select Board?
I am running for the Select Board. I've lived in the town of Hartford for over 20 years. I love the town, and I'm focusing on giving back to the town.
Now, what do you think are the most crucial issues for the town of Hartford?
I would like to focus on funding other than tax-based funding. So I'd like to find creative ways to bring money into the town other than taxes.
Now, when you think of that, Sandy, what comes to mind as a specific example of ways other than taxes would benefit the town of Hartford?
Well, a couple come to mind. I actually think about grants. I also think about using people who actually work in the town of Hartford and utilizing their knowledge and what they have to offer.
What I'm hearing you say is an emphasis on buying local and using local contractors.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea. It gives back to the town, and we're using sources that are right here.
What changes would you like to see in our municipal government?
I would like to focus more, like I said, on getting funding from other than the tax base. I've been talking to a lot of local residents, and I've heard many people express concern in regards to the taxes and the way that they're increasing. And so, like I said, I'm basically focusing on getting funding back that way.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you're concerned about taxes in general.
Yes, taxes in general. And I get that, like I said, a lot from the local townspeople that I've been talking to. I've heard a lot about infrastructure in our roads, and people are quite concerned about that. So I'd like to focus on maybe finding creative ways to bring revenue into the town.
Can you talk about specific goals that you hope to achieve as a select board member?
Well, mostly I think to start with it'll be learning more. I don't know a whole lot, and feel like I'll learn a lot to start with, and then as I learn I'll be able to offer more in the way of my strengths and assets.
Well, we all wish you the best of luck, and we hope people will turn out to vote in big numbers this year. And thank you, Sandy Mariotti, for
Thank you very
coming.
much.
Hi, our next candidate today is Luke Eastman, and Luke is running for a 2-year term on the Select Board. So, welcome, Luke.
Thanks, Dave.
I have some questions for you today, and I'd like to start off with the question, why are you running for Select Board?
Well, I'm from Hartford. I grew up here, and Hartford's always been a very vibrant blue-collar community. It's been a great place to live and to work, whether you're an artist or a tradesperson or a farmer. And one of the reasons that I'm running is because I really want to protect the unique character of our town, and I want to make sure that Hartford stays affordable for the working families that live here.
Well, you're clearly enthusiastic about your hometown, Luke, but what needs to change?
So what I keep hearing from people when I'm talking to my family members or people on the street is that there are a lot of people who are afraid that they're not going to be able to afford their taxes in Hartford. And one of the reasons for that fear is that we have got to rein in chronic overspending on our town bonded items. For example, we had the West Hartford Library, we had the Queechee Bridge, we had the recreational fields. What happens is the town manager will go, for all of these projects, the town manager goes to one specific architect. He gets an estimate for how much that's going to cost. He comes back to the people of Hartford and he says, okay, to rebuild the Queechee Bridge, it's going to cost this, this, and this. To put up the West Hartford Library, it's going to cost this amount. The townspeople then vote for it. But when the rubber meets the road and those estimates are actually put out there, and the bids are actually put out there, well, then the costs come back usually well above the estimate. In all of these cases, above the estimate. So people are starting to feel like they're being sold a bill of goods. They're told things are going to cost one amount, and then when the actual price tag comes due, it costs much, much more. So I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to address how the town is managing getting its estimates for its bond projects. If we've been going back to the same architect time and again and all of his estimates are low, then I'm wondering why the town manager isn't trying a different architect. I know that we have those resources in our town. That's one big way.
Well, your next question has to do with growth. What kind of growth do you want to see in Hartford?
Well, growing up here, having the advantage of being able to watch Hartford develop, and Vermont in general develop over the last 30 years, I can really say that we're at a crossroads. On the one hand, you'll have people say that, so on the one hand we have the kind of smart growth and targeted development, and here I'm talking about development in our dense downtowns like White River, or even in the village centers of Queechee. Smart growth that's going to take advantage of our existing public transportation systems, growth that's going to help us to cut down on the amount of fossil fuels that we're going to need, and growth that's going to bring the kind of jobs into town that are really necessary. The flip side of that is I hear a lot of people saying, well, the only way that we're going to get your tax rate down is by packing more people in, more people. And you know, I'm not anti-growth, but I think if that's not done thoughtfully, then what you wind up with is gentrification. If you do try and do too much too quick, if you build too much too quick trying to attract new people, it makes it unaffordable for the people who already live here.
Shifting topics, Luke, what about drugs, particularly opiates?
I think that drugs, especially opiates and prescription pill abuse, is a huge problem in our town. And I think the underlying root of that is that the kids in our town have problems with drugs because the kids in our town lack opportunities. We really need to be working harder to bring in the kind of jobs that are going to give them the kind of future that they can believe in. They need to feel like they have something to work for. One of the things that we can also do to address that is to bring in a new type of policing, something called community policing.
Well, can you expand a little bit on community policing? What is community policing?
In a nutshell, what the community policing model revolves around the idea of creating a good, strong relationship between the police department and the citizens of the town. So what we need to do is we need to spend our money not on these vanity projects to attract people to our town, but on the basic infrastructure and services that are going to lift the quality of life for everyone here. One of the things that we do need to invest in is a quality police force and make sure that we're attracting and retaining the type of police officers who want to stay in our community, who want to get to know our community, and want to live here. We already have the seeds for that kind of police department in Hartford PD right now. We've got plenty of good officers. Tom Lyman jumps to mind, as well as Deputy Chief Brad Vale. We already have a good core of officers who are really familiar with our community, and I think would be a good basis for community policing.
Well, Luke, thank you for your questions, and on behalf of the people of the town of Hartford, I want to thank you for stepping in and running for public office.
Thanks very much, Dave. Thanks for having us.
All the best to you. I hope people will come out and vote in big numbers this year.
I do too. Get out and vote, Hartford.